Okay, we should be live now. Are we live? Kim, do you see us? Don't see us yet. Give us a second. If you're watching on Chabad.org, please say hi. It's good to be back after 2 weeks where I was in Israel. The people on our regular page have seen a lot of action, but if they're watching on Chabad.org, they missed all the good stuff. Me and Steve together. Okay. You see me or no? You see me? Did you comment? You tell me you see me so I can know that you see me. You know, I'm saying you see me. Okay, I haven't seen any comments on Chabad.org just yet. So wait one more second. Yeah. Where's Marsha?
I don't know. She comes to be here. Oh no, she's away. She went with Steve. She didn't leave yet. She not leave tomorrow. No, she left.
Okay, can I see your comment? If anyone else is watching, please say hi. Anyone on Chabad.org watching that we can say hi to? Make sure it's working. You're on my personal page. I saw your comment. She's gonna what?
She was gonna leave, but then she's.
Here she is, Marsha. We were waiting for you. When you weren't here, we couldn't even imagine starting without you. That's not actually true, but it's okay. See how my throat makes it through tonight. We're still waiting for someone who's watching on the Chabad.org page to say hi, so I know that it's working. If not, we start anyway. Marsha, you good? Baruch Hashem. Okay. Let's start, my friends. Yes, Esther says we should start. Yes, Esther, is that what you say? Of course. Such a good attitude. Okay. Gail and Joe are watching us. I don't know if you're watching on the same computer, on different computers, because Gail can see and hear us, and Joseph just says hi. It's a happy marriage. You're watching in the same house in different rooms, right? Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start. I may need another tea later because my throat's like, I don't know why. There's not. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I'll just do cold water. Okay, so I am very, very excited to be talking about Israel, more specifically Hebron. As I was preparing today, I could not believe that it's only been 1 week since we're back. Does it feel like that to you? So for those that are watching online, Steve is sitting in the room next to us. Steve was in Israel together with me. Hello, Shira. Hello, Gail. So it doesn't feel like we were back a week. It feels like, I don't know, a month or so that I've been back. Israel already feels like a memory. Most importantly, it feels like it's time to go back again. That's really how it feels. He's still there. He's still there. Gail, Robert is still there. Robert is still there. I don't think he's watching. I don't think he... Yeah, it's something like that. It's the middle of the night there, yeah. Either I don't think he'd be watching us. He's there. He's living it. I'm saying he's living it. It's actually very hard for me to comprehend that I've only been back for literally 7 days. Well, 8 days now. We came back last Monday. And it doesn't feel like that. It feels like so much has happened in the last week. It's just quick. I'm really struggling to wrap my mind around the fact that it's only been 1 week since we're back in America. But so my heart is still in Israel. And I can't wait for next year. There will be another trip, God willing, next year. Everybody spoke to the rabbis in JLI about it today. So I spoke about it on Shabbos. I spoke about it in my email. Today I want to focus specifically on the strength of the character of the people in Israel, and specifically in the lens of Hebron, because Hebron is the, so to say, the theme of this week's Torah reading. If you read this week's Torah reading, you know that this week is what? Anyone knows? What's so exciting about this week's parsha, the parsha of Chaye Sarah?
Sarah dies and he buys the.
Sarah dies. That's not so exciting. Well, yeah. Correct. This week, we learn about the first piece of real estate that the Jews ever actually owned in the land of Israel. Last week and 2 weeks ago, when God promises Abraham the land of Israel that'll be his forever and ever. So it was a promise of God, but it hadn't actually taken place in a physical sense yet. Even though whatever God says is forever and it's true. And so God had promised the land became ours the moment God promised it to us. But the first actual transition where we actually took possession, that we owned land, only takes place in this week's Torah reading. In fact, one of the reasons why the shepherds of Abraham and the shepherds of Lot couldn't get along is because the shepherds of Lot said, one day we'll inherit the land of Israel, so let our sheep eat wherever they want. And the shepherds of Avraham, who have been trained to be very careful not to steal something that wasn't theirs, said it's not ours yet. We can't let our sheep in other people's property. They need to go far away to ownerless property. So the first piece of land that belongs to the Jews is this week's Torah reading. Question. We barely started, but yeah, what's your question?
Totally not related. So you go over this with the men every morning. Do you record that and post it?
I do record. I don't do it anymore. Now I'm in the middle of doing the book of Joshua. It is all on Spotify. I haven't shared it, but yeah, I went through all of the entire Torah in short podcasts. They're all on Spotify. Just look for the Parsha. It's called the Parsha podcast, I think.
But I would have to look for this week's.
Yes, I can send. I should send it. I really should send it out because it's a beautiful resource, and it's already done. It's online. It's out there. Yeah, if you search my name, if you go to Spotify and you type Rabbi Yankie Denburg or just Yankie Denburg, you'll see it's called the Parsha podcast, and you'll see. And there's a five short, like 15-minute clips on the whole Parsha.
Because had I not read somebody's email this week, I would not know about the buying the cake.
Yeah, we can send it out. I should send it out.
Could you send it out like for that day?
I send it every day for that day, like on the email, because people can get sick of it. I mean, I could.
No. Like people that I don't know, they started groups.
Maybe. I don't know daily. I think people get sick of getting it every single day. I think once a week, maybe for the whole week. You know,
Then you have to listen to 15 minutes times.
you can do whatever you want. Okay, let's talk about it afterwards. Yeah, you could, yeah. Anyway, so I want to specifically talk about the people that live there and how I found myself. I'm not gonna say like I found myself, but how we could find ourselves, how I did find myself. I'm not being dramatic when I say how I found myself in the city of our fathers, in the city of Hebron. Okay, let me just tell you that for me personally, on a personal level, the most powerful city, the most spiritual city, where I personally feel the most spiritually connected just being in the city, more than Jerusalem, is Hebron. Hebron is a city of connection. That's what it is. And in fact, the word Hebron, why is it called Hebron? Hebron is connected to the word Chibur. Chibur is connection. Like Chaver is a friend that are connected. Hebron is a city of connection. And Hebron is a place where a Jew feels an automatic sense of connection to God. Now, this is true really with all of the land of Israel. Wherever you are in the land of Israel, you have an automatic connection and belonging to the land. For me, one of the epiphanies that I had in my life was a Shabbat that I spent in Hebron about like 17, 18 years ago. Side note, I slept like in a literally like in a staircase. I don't even know how to describe where I slept. It was literally like under a staircase. Like three guys slept under a staircase. And Steve can tell me if I'm exaggerating. When we were there, when we went to Rabbi Cohen in Hebron, we went to his house and we're talking to him. So it was a much more intimate group. So it was more. So I told him that I was here for Shabbos. He remembered. So I told him where I slept. I said, I remember I slept like under a staircase. He's like, yeah, I know where it was. People don't sleep. We don't let people sleep there anymore. It's been deemed uninhabitable by more modern standards. But that Shabbos, you feel a sense of connection. And one of the things I'm sharing on a personal level, one of the things that most inspired me on our trip to Israel was the strength of character of the people living in Israel. The simplistic authenticity by which they say, I'm just a regular guy living in my land, without any sense of recognition of the sacrifice or of the difficulties or of the challenges that they may be facing by living where they live. They literally see it as regular, as normal, as nothing to be. They have a hard life. Not phased in any way. Unlike people in America. I had a conversation with a lady. I met her on Shabbos. I was walking home from Shul. Then she emailed me after that. I continued the conversation with her, who has never been to Israel, or never since she was a kid, because she knows someone that was killed there, someone from here that went there and was killed. She decided she's never going to Israel. Whatever. I'm not here to give commentary on the Americans that don't have the emotional stamina to stand side by side with their family in Israel. I want to talk about the positive impact it had on me to be willing to fight for who I am by seeing people who take for granted what it means to be connected. It's just when you're connected, you don't realize you're connected. Like a fish in the water. Does it know that it's in the water? A fish is, the water is its habitat. A human on earth, a human in air. We breathe air. We barely realize we're breathing air. It's so natural to us. A Jew in Israel having sacrificed for his land is natural. And that's something that I personally felt most in Hebron years ago, and you still feel it. This year, this particular trip, I felt it twice. I felt it really strong. Actually, 3 times, but twice really strong. Once was, where I felt it most strongly was on Friday morning in Ir David. And you were there. Friday morning, we went to the ancient biblical city of King David. So if you know where the old city of Jerusalem is today, as our tour guide kept on telling us over and over on their trip in Israel, what you see is not what you get. And right, what you see is not what you get. You see the old city, you think these walls are the old city. Relative to Israel, that's very, very young. Actually, it's like the young walls of the young city. The ancient, there's a few different old cities of Jerusalem, different eras of history. The original city of King David went all the way down to Jerusalem on top of a mountain, they would call it a mountain, we would call it a hill, but okay, top of a mountain, and there's a valley. The bottom of the valley on the south side of Jerusalem is the Shiloach Springs, or the Siloam Springs, which today is what we call Siloam. And if you stand on the top of Jerusalem, which we got to do on Friday, and you really see it clearly, you have the kids, you're here on Jerusalem here, there's a Kidron Valley on the east side, and then you have what's called East Jerusalem, or Siloam, which is almost exclusively Arab. You have a few isolated Jews that in the very last 2-3 years have managed to buy through complex middlemen and hiding their sale and the whole complex operation, have been able to buy property not only in the old city of Jerusalem today, but even in the east side of Jerusalem, even in Siloam. And Siloam, and we saw it, and it's spooky a little bit. After October 7th, I had pictures of this. We were busy spotting them out. After October 7th, Hamas sympathizers in Silwan to show support for Hamas and to try and intimidate the Jews of Jerusalem that see Silwan, because there's a valley in between, painted big eyes on the walls of their house to say, like, we're watching you. Like we're big brothers watching you. And there's a number of houses in Silwan where you see in green and in red, painted on the walls, these eyes that are staring into Jerusalem. So anyway, I'm not going to get too distracted into the story, but basically you have the valley goes down. We went through the tunnels where the water was, the dry tunnels. You come out at the bottom. And on the way, we happened to meet someone who lives in East Jerusalem, which is a very Arab place. But within East Jerusalem, you have the East Jerusalem south of the old city of Jerusalem, not in Siloam. And then you have Jews that are now, in the last 2 years, 3 years, that are living in Siloam, which is really pushing the envelope, where the army has to take the kids to school every single day. The army comes every morning to pick up the kids that live in these. They have 3 complexes, one on the top, one on the bottom, one in the middle. And the army has to come to this house where they live around by barbed wire with guards and all that to come take the kids to school. The Israeli government has a legal obligation to provide schooling for all of their kids. So it's cheaper for them to send the army every single morning to take the kids to school than it is to put a school there.
Now, is it cheap real estate there?
It's very expensive because you're buying it. It's very expensive. You're buying it through multiple middlemen and everything. You can't buy it. It's the old city. It's still on.
The Arabs can't sell the Jews directly.
Yeah, they're killed. You're going through multiple layers of people and fake court cases because they want a Jewish presence in the city of Jerusalem. The Arabs claim Jerusalem is their capital. The Jews that's not the right word. The Jews have Jerusalem as our capital, but we have to create facts on the ground. And so Jews are living there. So anyway, so listen to the story. True story as it happened on Friday morning. We meet a friend of Yankie, our tour guide, who happens to be getting his motorcycle on this very steep road that we could barely walk down, forget about driving down. And we start, Yankie sees his friend, I told him what's like to live here, whatever, we start talking. He's describing what it's like to live in East Jerusalem, which again, you're surrounded by Arabs that don't like you very much. But now, over the course of many years, many Jews have already moved into East Jerusalem, or South Jerusalem rather, south Jerusalem, under the ancient city of what's today the old city of Jerusalem, but was part of King David's Jerusalem. Silwan, only the last 2 years. So she says, nah, no big deal to live. And we're talking like, it's so hard to live, this narrow road where, like, big deal, I can have a motorcycle here, no one will take it from me. It's safe. Those guys, he points across the Kidron Valley into Silwan. Those guys, they're the heroes. I'm just a regular guy. And I'm not exaggerating. That was exactly what he says. I even have a video of me with him. I gave him 2 gift cards from the community. Told him to buy his wife gifts for flowers for Shabbos, whatever. He was so touched. Like, I don't need it. I don't deserve it. In his mind, he's a regular guy just living in Jerusalem. Even though it's in a very, very bad neighborhood. But he feels safe because he can have his motorcycle there. So, those guys, they're the heroes. I'm a regular guy.
It's like gentrification.
Yeah. But the point is, to him, he's living in what 98% of Israel would consider a dangerous place. And yet in his mind, to quote him, I'm not using my own words, it's not verbatim. This is literally a quote. I'm just a regular guy. We saw that when we went to the kibbutz in the south of Gaza, in the Tiva Sarah. And here's a guy, he's not religious, unlike the guy in Jerusalem. He's not wearing a kippah. He put on film with us, but he's not a regular guy that prays, etc. And yet to him, living in the land, living on the border of Gaza, is fundamentally important. This is a guy that grew up in a socialist kibbutz, literally socialist. I'm talking social, but they separated him from his parents from the age of, 6 months old or something. He was living in a nursery with only kids and the guardian, where if they woke him in the middle of the night, they were told to go back to bed. There was no mother in the middle of the night from when he was 6 months old. It's real socialism. That's how he grew up. Really left, like hardcore left. And now he's hardcore right, but he's still not religious. But to him, the land of Israel, this is my land. Of course I'm going to live the Tiva Sarah. I'm not going to go through the whole history now. I was in the Sinai from 10 people that were killed. This is his land. He's connected. And the third place where we see that, where I felt that this past trip, was in Hebron when we were speaking to Rabbi Danny Cohen, who is an amazing guy. Amazing guy. And those who have gone previous trips, who he is, him and Zoe Pacheva. An amazing rabbi. And he was describing what it's like to live in Hebron. And he said something that touched me. We were asking him, was it scary since October 7th? What's been going on? Has it been rioting here? Has it been fighting in the streets? So generally, Hebron has been extremely quiet. Very, very quiet. He's actually in the army. He's in the army. Talking about religious people in the army. This Chabad rabbi, he's in the army currently. He's in reserve. What they do in Hebron, because there's so few soldiers there, the soldiers are elsewhere. Local people living in Hebron that are reservists have their own shifts of duty there's different guard positions or lookout positions around the city where they're watching. Every 16 hours, he has a 4-hour shift. Every 16 hours. And between all the different residents that are soldiers, it's covered. So there's no soldiers. We saw very few soldiers on the street. It's local residents that are patrolling and taking turns in the watchtowers. So he just came. We came in the afternoon. He said, I just came like 2 hours ago in uniform, standing at a lookout tower for a 4-hour shift of duty. Every 16 hours, he's on shift for 4 hours. So he said, in general, it's been very, very quiet in Hebron. Things have been peaceful, calm. There hasn't been any really riots or anything like that. Yeah. Hebron is Hebron, just to give you context, Hebron, the city of Hebron has 215,000 inhabitants. I just checked it up now before the class. 215,000 Arabs living. You know how many Jews live in Hebron? 20,000. 1,000. Remember what he said?
800. He gave a whole bunch of statistics. I don't remember.
He said 800. 800 Jews living surrounded by 200,000 Arabs. That kind of, it's a little bit of a high dynamic over there. I checked on the website, Wikipedia says 1,100. Chabad Hebron's website says 700, whatever. But you're talking about 80 families. This is for sure. There's 80 Jewish homes surrounded by 215,000 Arabs. And the number, there's 80 families, also yeshiva. So that's kind of how you get to the number of 1,000 Jews, whatever, because there's 215 students in the yeshiva over there, which is not even exactly where we were, but there's a yeshiva there. Now, Hebron in 1997 there was an agreement. They gave most of Hebron to the Palestinian Authority, which is called H1, and H2 is the area under Israeli control. That area, that neighborhood that we were in, has only 40,000 Arabs to the 800 Jews in that neighborhood. You're literally in an Arab neighborhood. So he said, on the night that Iran launched missiles into Israel, and there were missiles flying everywhere. The second, not the first one, the second one, a lot came into Israel. First one, very few came in. And he said he was out on the roof and he was on duty, he was on patrol. And he's on top of the, he's looking at the city. And he sees tons of Arabs coming out onto the rooftops to cheer. They're watching with their phones and they're cheering the Iranian attack on Israel. Now you have to realize that these Arabs living in Israel are in just as much danger as the Jews living in Hebron are. They're all in the same danger. By the way, just today, an Arab was killed, unfortunately, by a Hezbollah missile in the north of Israel. Today, an Arab was killed, and 4 were wounded, and 1 was killed, a woman. I forgot the name of the village in the north of Israel. So the missiles are not so well organized, they can go anywhere. And so these people, instead of being in shelters because there's missiles, hundreds of them flying into Israel, they're cheering the attack from Iran against Israel. They hate Israel that much, even though they live there. Correct. He said that was a very scary, I don't know if he didn't use the word scary, like disconcerting, a little, very lonely, to watch your neighbors cheering at you being attacked.
When they're just as vulnerable as they are.
When they're just as vulnerable. When they're just as vulnerable. And they don't care. To them, the joy of Jews being attacked is more powerful than the fear of being killed by a missile that's coming over your head with the sirens going.
Wasn't the Rabbi actually, wasn't that the synagogue that we saw the Rabbi used to hang out in?
We went there, yes. So anyway, so the point is, and here's a guy, and we talk about like him living there, and he's like so fun to live there. Like he would never give up living there. He was talking about somebody else that if you would ask him to buy, he was someone of the first families that lived there. If you would offer him a penthouse in Miami, he would look at you like you fell off the moon. And they're living in a tiny house. I don't know how many kids he has, but it's a tiny, tiny house. You're in his house.
He was excited about if they were going to do something to the building that was just outside there and expand or something like that.
Yeah, every time they do any expansion, like 8 feet, there's like a whole celebration because the government is so restrictive. I don't remember. His dining is like he eats on his rooftop. That's where he eats because there's no space. His house is literally like probably like 8 feet wide by 30 feet. Little, it's tiny. You walk and you can barely get to the roof. It's a narrow thing. There's like one room. It's a kitchen that's maybe 6 feet or 8 feet by like 2 feet. That's the whole tiny house.
So many people from that kitchen.
Yeah, and it's tiny.
He said they had soldiers over to go ahead and do Shabbos dinner and stuff.
You have shifts. I was there on the Friday night before. Now it's quiet. Now there's very, very few soldiers in Hebron. He would have a few hundred soldiers that would come in shifts. As they were coming, they were like 40 at a time. They would come, they would go. It was like a meal, like a revolving meal. Anyway, so here's the takeaway for us. These are people that are living in a land that by ostensible definitions, if you were to look at it, logically, intellectually, are highly dangerous, living in tiny spaces, surrounded by enemies, fighting to exist. And why are they there? Because they feel connected. They feel, this is my home. The connection we have with our homes is not logical. It's just once a home becomes your home, it's your space, and it becomes a bond that exists there. You're in your natural zone, and you feel whole, you feel safe, which is why, by the way, if someone, God forbid, robs you in your home, you don't feel like I was robbed. How do you feel? Violated. And those happen to people where it's not just they took my money, they were in my space. I was violated. My privacy was taken away from me. Something was, I don't feel safe in my own home. And that's a very powerful thing. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of the history. I already kind of went into the history of Hebron. It took a little longer than I expected it to take. But I want to show you the history of Hebron. I want to share with you the mystical, spiritual dimension for us from the story that we could take for ourselves, that every one of us, even if we're not living in Hebron now, we can all have that. So let's start in the very beginning. What's the very beginning? They said the very first piece of real estate that the Jewish people were ever going to conquer, right? Not conquer, to buy. So I'm going to go through the story quickly. I'm sure many of you know it. The very beginning of our Torah reading, the Parasha of Chayei Sarah, chapter 23 of Genesis, tells us that Sarah died, 127 years old. Verse number 2, she died in a place called Kiryas Arba. Kiryas Arba, which is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to eulogize Sarah and to wail for her. By the way, let me just point out, because I'm going to come back to this a little bit later, but I'll point it out already now so you'll have it in your brain. How many different things were described in this verse? Well, we have one action, one verb, Sarah dying. But there's Sarah, there's Kiryat Arba, there's Hebron, and there's the land of Canaan, right? And then there's Abraham. So we have Abraham, Sarah, Kiryat Arba, Hebron, and I missed one, and Kiryat Arba, and the land of Canaan. I'm going to explain to you spiritually what the Zohar explains about all those 5 things and how that's relevant to us. So hold that in your head for a little bit later. Anyway, so after, after he mourns and wails for her, he says, I need to bury her. So he goes to the people of Ches, says, please help me find the burial plot, to say wherever you want. So he says, please speak to a man called Ephron. Well, why? Verse number 9, what should you ask from Ephron? Ask Ephron that he may give me the Machpelah cave. The word, we call it in Hebrew, Ma'arat HaMachpelah. Ma'ara is a cave. Machpelah, that means doubled. The doubled cave, which belongs to him, which is at the end of his field. For a full price, let him give it to me in the midst of your land for a burial property. Rashi tells us why was it called a double cave? Because it had a bayis v'aliyah al gaba. It had a house and the upstairs. Remember that as well, okay? You're going to be important for later on. A house and the upstairs. Interesting way of writing it. I'm not going to get to the technical Hebrew language, but that's what it means. A house and an upstairs. So it was a double cave, a 2-story cave. Excellent question. Why are some of these cemeteries called a cave? Because people were often buried in vaults or in caves, because that was the way they did it back then. They didn't bury them flat in the ground. Even in Egypt and in many other cultures too, they were buried in tombs and in vaults. And especially in Israel, you have them buried in the ground. But in Israel, a cave or a hillside, they made a vault inside of the side of a hill. It's in the earth. It's not like a mausoleum today, which is a marble, locker. It's in Israel, when you're in the side of a cave, you're in the actual earth of the hill. So that's where they were buried, and that was a very common way of burying, especially important people were buried in these vaults.
I think of like a space where you can walk in and there's.
Correct. They would put the body into this cave, and there would be like a covering, like almost like a coffin or a mound, and there was a place to go pay respects.
Did they dig it in the earth, or they just put them on the land in the cave?
So there were vaults, and some of them were buried in, some were like a cave, like underground, some were in the side of a hill. For example, we saw when we were by Silwan, by Kidron Valley, you have a whole Harazes, the whole cemetery there. And then below that, you have an entrance. It's on the side of the valley. Like you have a mountainside. You have a mountainside, a Mount of Olives. And you have in the side of the mountain, you have openings into burial caves. So they're caves that are they're below ground because the ground continues, right? The ground continues above it. You following?
So you can actually walk into the cave, or are they in the, like, if this is the mountain, are they just in the?
I think there was both. So I remember seeing, not on this trip, I remember on the last trip going, I don't remember whose caves it was. There was a whole bunch of mounds. They put the bodies in. There would be a narrow cave. There would just be like openings almost, kind of like what a mausoleum would look like. The only difference is that it was in the earth instead of in a marble locker, but like opening for bodies. But then there were caves that were full on, like the cave of Machpelah. That was a full on cave. It was a house with burial sites within the house. That was a place you came to. People gave a lot. If you think people make fancy funerals today and spend money on a funeral today, funerals back then seemingly were very, very, very expensive. And they built a whole house, in Egypt they built pyramids, right? Again, this was the way it was done back then. There was big, elaborate places to create as permanent monuments and as a place to come to connect to the person that had passed away. So that's the way it was done back then. So he has this 2-story house. He doesn't just buy the house, though. He buys the whole thing, the field, the trees, everything that's there. And so it was, he wants to buy it. So Ephron says, don't worry, I'll give it to you as a gift. And Avram says, no, thank you. I don't want any gifts. I want to pay full price. I don't want anyone to ever come back and say it's mine. I want full possession. I want it to be a legal deed, binding without any question whatsoever. So Ephron says to his friend Avram, well, there's a favor. What's 400 silver coins? Avram was smart enough to read between the lines. And Avram listened. So let's go back to the text over here. Verse number 16. 1 second. Let me open up the screen again. Verse number 16. And Avram listened to what Ephron was really saying. He's asking for 400 silver coins. And Avram weighed out to Ephron the silver that he had named in the hearing before the sons of Ches, 400 shekels of silver, accepted by the merchant, meaning even within silver coins, there's two kinds of silver coins. One is a silver coin that's locally accepted, it's silver, but it's not like certified silver that can be used as tender anywhere. And the kind of silver coins he gave him were certified legal tender that could be used anywhere you wanted. You take these silver coins, they were recognized, they were branded. I don't know exactly what the process was, but they were recognized to be weighed to be authentic, legitimate silver coins. It wasn't just silver. And so, verse 17, the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, here changes the word a little bit, facing Mamre, the field, and everything was established as Avram's possession, which included the field and the cave that was in it, and the trees that were in the field, which were in its entire border all around. It was to Avram as a possession before the eyes of the sons of Ches, in the presence of all who had come in the gate of the city. Meaning, it was an absolutely unequivocally clear, legally binding deed that the entire property, not just the cave, the field, the entrance to the cave, the trees around the cave, everything belongs to Abraham. Afterwards, Avram buries his wife Sarah in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, which is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Okay? That's the burial of Sarah in this territory, yes.
So isn't there an Arab mosque like right there?
Excellent, yes. Good question. I don't know if you asked me a question, but yes. So right now, sorry. So right now, if you go to Hebron, what do you see by this cave of Machpelah? You don't see a cave, first of all. You see a massive building that you need to climb up a huge staircase to get to. And by the way, I didn't see this until now, but in 2020, Israel finally approved putting an elevator there. And there is now an elevator. I don't know if it's functional or not, but if on the side, I don't know if you noticed it. There's an elevator on the side. It's new. I never saw it before. Who has been to the cave of Machpelah? Just Marsha. Okay, I'm not going to try and describe it then, whatever. There's an elevator now. Israel in general is not a very handicapped, friendly place, but there's now an elevator that goes up like a hallway over like the police station, whatever, that goes, you can get into Machpelah and whatever. That is so when you go now, you see this massive building. That building was built by King Herod. King Herod was a very, very famous king. I don't want to spend too much history now. I could. Just came back from Israel with an amazing tour guide. I could. It happens to be the only remaining building of King Herod is this building. The temple, which was built by Herod, is destroyed. We have one wall that he built, the retaining wall. Caesarea, the Colosseum, was destroyed. We have some ruins of it. The only intact building that was never destroyed in the war is the cave of Machpelah, which is actually a massive building he built over the cave, to cover over the cave. Later, I think the Mamelukes, whoever, built another wall on top of that. And you can see, if you look at the stones, you can see which stones are from which time in history. You can see where the stones actually change. And they're a little bit different. And so the Jews have always been there. You had the Byzantine Empire, you had the Arabs, then you had the Mamluks, you had the Crusaders, you had the Ottoman Empire. Each period, you had Jews living. In fact, there's a Byzantine synagogue that was excavated in Hebron. Now, when the Crusaders, so basically the Jews had the cave. Herod built this big building on top, 12 meters high. Then came along the Arabs, the Muslims. They built a mosque on top of that. The Crusaders came, kicked out the Muslims, built a church where the mosque was. They kicked both the Crusaders, kicked the Jews and the Arabs out. Then when the Muslims came back with the Mamluks, they kicked the Crusaders out. And they let the Jews back. They didn't let the Jews back in. They only let them come until the 5th step of the steps outside, and then till the 7th step. So Jews will pray outside of the cave, outside of the building rather, on the steps, which is till today where people pray. I mean, we go inside, but there's also, if you saw, we went to the side of the steps, so where people used to pray back then. And then that was in 1266, when the Muslims didn't allow the Jews and the Christians into the Tomb of the Patriarchs, but Jews were already living then. Already from 1290, you have a Jewish cemetery in Hebron. That's still used till today, from the year 1290. I'll tell you a story about that soon. There's always been a Jewish community there. The Mittler Rebbe, the second Chabad Rebbe, purchased a property in Hebron, which is still owned by the Schneerson family till today. That's the shul that we were in. There's a small little shul. I mean, it's like 8 feet by 6 feet or something, or like 10 feet by, like really how big is that shul that we went into? You have a picture of it. We'll show you after. It's tiny, but it's a property owned by the previous Rebbe, by the Mittler Rebbe. And Jews were there until 1929. What happened in August of 1929? It was actually right after the previous Rebbe I went to visit. There was a huge pogrom. 67 Jews were killed by the Arabs. Another 60 were maimed and wounded. Chana's grandfather, Tzvi Abba Lerman, was a young boy who was in Hebron studying in the yeshiva in the Beit Ramano, which again, I have so much history I was reading today that I could share, but I have a class I want to still share. But he was there in hiding. My wife's grandfather was hiding in a pot. The small boy, he was hiding in one of those big, kitchen soup pots. He hid inside the pot. That's where he hid during the pogrom. They didn't find him. Thank God he survived. And only the British watched the pogrom happen without intervening. They didn't want to get involved. So for hours, the Arabs were going. It was a prepared pogrom with knives, with axes, with whatever they had, but unrestrained. They went for hours until it started getting out of control, and the British were afraid they would come to the British police station. But then, after many hours, they finally came and they stopped the pogrom. And it was like finally, when everyone had already been killed and all that, they took the remaining Jews out of Hebron for their safety, but they never let them back in. In 1929, 67 Jews were buried. I think like 40 of them were buried in one grave in the old cemetery of Hebron. That was the last time Jews were buried there, until I'll tell you a story in a little bit. The next time a Jew was buried in that cemetery, Jews were kicked out. They were not allowed to go back. They tried in 1939 or something. They tried to go. The British kicked them out again. 1948, the Jordanians take control over Jordan. Obviously, no Jews are allowed into Jordan until 1967, when the Jews conquer Hebron in the 6-Day War. But even then, they were not able to take control. No Jews were living there until 1968. A few Jews went. I'm going to tell you the story soon. Before I tell you the story of Hebron today, and the story of Sarah Nachshon that I want to share with you, and about the idea of connection to the land, I want to show you something that I think is very, very important. It's a little technical, but I think I'll make it simple enough that you'll understand it. But first, the question. Why does Avram pay so much money for the cave? The 400 silver coins that he pays is a huge amount of money. By standards, it was a tremendous ripoff. Now, he offered to give it to him for free. I understand he didn't want to take it for free because, I don't want to ever contest my rights to the land. But why is it that Avram pays overpriced, big time, the best quality currency, 400 silver coins? It was a ripoff by all standards. He was Jewish, right? He should have negotiated for a discount. That's for a sale, half off. First Jewish, that's for a wholesale price. So there's a very, very important lesson here, which is, and the Rebbe talks about this, when it comes to holiness, when it comes to Kedusha, when it comes to something being holy, you have to be willing to pay full price. When something is cheap or something is free, very often it's not holy. You know how you know something is valuable? When it's expensive. You know how you know something is holy? When it's difficult. There's a very famous verse. It describes that the Jews were complaining in the desert that they had no food to eat. When they had the month, they didn't have meat, they wanted meat, and they complained to Moshe. And one of the lines of their complaint is very famous. They say, "We remember the fish that we ate for free in Egypt." Remember that? We remember the fish that we ate for free in Egypt. Now we have nothing, just little coriander seeds. The mom, we're bored, we're sick of it, we need meat. We remember the fish we ate for free in Egypt. Now, they didn't get fish for free in Egypt. They were slaves, so nothing was free. When you're a slave, there ain't no free lunch when you're a slave. But let's leave that alone for right now. This is the difference between Egypt and holiness. In Egypt, a land of impurity, a land of evil, fish is free, metaphorically. Fish is free, meaning it's a free lunch. It's easy. It feels good. It's enticing. There's no effort required. The land of Israel is a land of difficulty, a land where you need to sweat and toil. And that's how you know it's holy. That's how you know it's holy. I heard a great line, I'll repeat later. Dr. Seuss says, no one said it would be easy. They just said it would be worth it. Right? It's a beautiful line. No one said it would be easy. They just said it would be worth it. Avram is going to buy the first piece of land of the Jewish people. The first piece of land. And Avram knew that in order for me to transform this land from unholiness, from the land of Canaan to the land of Israel, to make it a Jewish land, to make it a Jewish base, it's going to require commitment and sacrifice and sweat, and in this case, money, a lot of money. But that's how we're going to make it holy. So he pays a huge sum of money, 400 silver coins. Now, I want to tell you something about the number 400. In Judaism, we have a certain metric, a certain way of determining the value of land. In the end of the book of Leviticus, in the end of the book of Vayikra, it's talking about a person makes a donation to make a consecration, to make a vow. He says, I'm going to give the value of my life as a gift to the temple. So how much is the value of his life? We don't see, well, is he talented? Is he healthy? Is he overweight in the beach? Is he a trained lawyer? Is he, I don't know. We don't judge that way. There's a flat fee depending on your age and your gender. A male between the age of 20 and 50, or 50 or 60, I remember, is 50 silver coins. Between a woman, is 30 silver, whatever it is. There's a flat, it doesn't make a difference. Every human life, because really human life is not quantifiable, it's not measurable, so it's a flat decree of the Torah, this is the value of this life. What about land? A person says, I consecrate the value of my field to the temple. He's not giving the actual field. If you give the field is redeemed by what its sale value is. So obviously one field is worth more than a different field. Location, this, that. But if a person just says, I want to give a donation of the value of my field, how do we determine what that value is? So look at the following verse in Leviticus. Okay, I'm making this simple for you. Look in chapter 27 of Leviticus, verse 16. Torah tells us that if a man consecrates some of the field of his inherited property to the Lord, the valuation shall be according to its sowing, meaning how much produce it can produce in this area of land, an area which requires a chomer of barley seeds at 50 silver shekels. Let me say this in very simple English. 50 silver coins is the value of a field big enough to produce a chomer. Don't worry what a chomer is. How big is that piece of land? The rabbis tell us 75,000 square feet. Amos, but I'm keeping it simple. Feet, okay? Even though it's really amos. So who's good at math? You guys good at math? No? Someone? Robert's not here. He's still in Israel. That's my in-house mathematician's not here. Bruce, you good at math? Get a calculator. Okay. Pretty good. So if the Torah tells us that 75,000 square feet of land is worth 50 silver coins, how much land, how many square feet of land does Avram buy with the value of his 400 silver coins? Times 8. Well, okay. 50 times 8. Let me help you out. 50 silver coins is 75,000 square feet. So 400 is 8 times 50, right? So what's 75,000 times 8? What? Get a calculator. Come on, Michelle, you have a calculator. Times 8. 600,000. Oh my gosh, you guys are.
You got a lot of numbers, 600,000.
600,000. 600,000. You guys follow that logic? I'll do it again very slowly, okay? It's not a magic trick. The Torah tells us that if you give a donation of the value of your field, the Torah gives a flat decree. Every field that can produce an amount of barley, which we say is 75,000 square feet, is redeemed for 50 silver coins. That's the Torah's valuation. So if 50 silver coins gets you 75,000 square feet, 400 silver coins gets you 600,000 amos. Again, I'm saying feet, it's amos, it's cubits. What is the number 600,000 in Judaism? How many Jews left Egypt? 600,000. How many souls are there to the Jewish people? 600,000. That's why the word Yisrael means Yeshishim Ribi Oises LaTorah. There's 600,000 letters in the Torah, because every single Jew has their letter of the Torah. We are told there's a basic idea in spirituality and Kabbalah that there's 600,000 Jewish souls. There's more than 600,000 Jews because we have subdivisions of the soul that breaks off and it splinters into many sparks. There are 600,000 Jewish souls, when original souls. So when Avram paid 400 silver coins to buy a piece of property in Israel, what was he doing at that moment? He was buying 600,000 cubits. How much space does a person take up? A cubit. That's how much we take up, is an amma, a foot. He was buying a foot of land for every single Jew should have their portion of the land of Israel. Beautiful teaching. Beautiful, beautiful teaching. Beautiful teaching. But it's not just a beautiful teaching from the Panei Acharaza, which the Rabbi quotes in the Sikha. It's a very important lesson for us. The story of Avram buying land in Israel is him buying every one of us a piece of land. It's like it's our home. So we were looking like they were looking at Jane F. So he has a tree that someone planted for his bar mitzvah. Like, oh, where's my tree, right? Yeah, so where's my tree? I have a few trees in Israel. Baruch Hashem. The Rabbi sent you a few trees in Israel somewhere. Where they are, we don't know. But right? So like, where's my tree? Every single Jew has a piece of the land that's his or hers that Abraham bought for us by paying 400 silver coins. This is the story of the double cave. There's a beautiful explanation of the Rebbe about the two hays. Machpelah is a double hay. The two hays in God's name. The first hay in God's name. The second hay in God's name. I want to tell you the point because I know I'm short on time. I want to tell you the story that brings out this point. In life, I missed something. You have a house and you have the upstairs. You have the bayis valley, you have the house and the upstairs. Some people go through life upstairs. They go through life easy. And some people have to go through the bottom, to the basement, to the bottom floor. It's hard work. If you remember, I told you earlier to pay attention to the opening verse of the story. What does the opening verse tell us? There was an Abraham, and there was a Sarah, and there was a Kiryat Arba, and there was a Hebron, and there was a land of Canaan. What do those represent, tells us the Kabbalah? Kabbalah tells us Abraham is the soul. Soul. Sarah is the body. Although the Zohar also says the opposite way. There's both ways, but we're going to do it this way for now. Sarah represents the body. Abraham is the soul. Why is Avram coming? To mourn the soul, to mourn the body that has died. Vatama Sarah. Sarah, the body has died. Where has it died? Bekiryat Arba. Arba is 4. Right, that's what Arba is, 4. What is it for? So we're told that the body is comprised of 4 elements of earth, air, water, and fire. When God made the body, God took water and he mixed it with earth to make a lump of clay. And then God breathed into the nostrils of man the breath of life. And then he infused a soul, which is fire, and the body is alive. And this is the 4 elements of the human body. Earth, water, fire, and air. So the Torah tells us that Sarah died Bekiryat Arba. The 4 elements that had kept her alive were no longer. Where did this happen? Where does the soul come to the body? Bechevron. I already told you that Chevron is the idea of connection, of bonding. And the soul, why does the soul come to the body? Why does the soul come to the body? In general, before we get to the death part, why does the soul enter the body? Why is there a chibur? Why is there a unity, a connection between the soul and the body?
The soul needs the body.
There's a mission. Be'eretz Canaan, to be in the land of Canaan. Canaan is the land of the merchants. Canaan is called the land of Socher, a land of merchants. The soul comes to the body to do business. You know the song, hey, Johnny, I can't sing, my throat is hurting me. Hey, Johnny, 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 what are you doing in the market? You know the song? I wasn't planning on singing, but it's in my head now. It's a famous Hasidic song. You don't buy, you don't sell, all you do is trouble. It's an allegory for the neshama. Hey, Johnny, 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 what are you doing in the market? What are you doing? If you're not buying, if you're not selling, what are you doing here, right? Just making trouble. The soul comes down to the body. It's a famous Hasidic song. We can say l'chaim later, and I'll explain to you greater length and greater depth. My point is, the soul comes down to the body. They become connected. They become united. They become chevron. Chevron is about connection. Why are they connected? In Eretz Canaan, in a land of merchants, in a land of business. The soul wants to make a profit. How does the soul make profit? With the physical objects of the physical world, which you can only do through the body. You can't make a profit if you don't invest money. The first rule of making money is you got to spend money, right? Even I know that. I mean, anyone knows that. If you don't invest, if you don't spend money, you're not going to make money. And if you only spend a little money, you're only going to make a little bit of money. If you want to make a lot of money, you didn't invest a lot of money, more or less. It's not an exact, science, but that's the idea. You can't make if you don't invest. The soul, to make a spiritual profit, needs to come down to a physical world. So the soul comes down into Chevron, comes down into the body, into the Kiryat Arba, to the body of the four elements, and it becomes united, Chevron. And then what happened? The body died. And when Sarah died, Avraham, the soul, comes to mourn and to wail over the loss of the body. The opportunity to make money is gone. You with me? This is the story of the opening verse. Of the opening verse. This is how the Kabbalah, this is how the Zohar explains this verse. That why is Avram, when it says that Avram came to mourn over Sarah, his wife that died, what's really happening is the soul is mourning over the loss of the body.
Sarah's soul.
The Avraham, which represents the soul, is mourning over the loss of the body. The body is gone. The four elements is gone. So now the soul is mourning and crying. Abraham is crying. He no longer can do business. He can no longer make a spiritual profit in the world. Okay? So, the story is over. Now that it's over, what does he do with the body? He buries the body in Ma'arat HaMachpelah, in this double cave. Why in the double cave? What does the double cave represent? What does the double cave teach us?
This world is the next.
Within this world, you have two worlds. Within this world, you have like a double-decker cave, double-decker bus. Seemingly, Avram should have just put her in a single floor. Why does he need two floors to bury one person? There's a very powerful message here. Sarah was a holy, holy soul, a tzaddik, a righteous woman. She's buried. She had in a way, she had a righteous life, a pure life. But you have most people, they live life not on the top floor. They live life in the bottom floor. The bayis, the ali al gabov. There's two floors that are all part of one cave. Two floors are all part of one cave. And the Torah is telling us a very important message over here. That the purchase of Chevron was not only a house for the tzaddikim, for the righteous Sarah. It was a double decker. Because there's a home upstairs and a home downstairs. Those who are upstairs are lucky. Those that are downstairs don't have it so good, but really they're even luckier. Because that's the ultimate purpose. It's like, I heard a great example of two people that were traveling through a swamp. One flew overhead in a helicopter, took some pictures. The other one had to walk through. It took him a few years. He got lost. He got bitten by snakes. He came out, he stunk to high heaven. His whole skin had absorbed the smell of the swamp that he couldn't wash it off. First guy took pictures. Okay, he took pictures. The second guy wrote a famous book on the surprises of the secrets of the swamp. Became an expert to help environmentalists figure out how to drain swamp and how to make roads through the swamp because he understood the swamp. The soul, we think from this perspective that what's greater? To be spiritual, to be upstairs, to be living a life removed from temptation and distraction and struggle. But from the perspective of the soul, from the perspective of Avraham Avinu, spiritually, the Zohar is telling us the spiritual perspective upstairs. Where is the ultimate money? Where is the ultimate gain? The ultimate fulfillment of the reason why the soul comes down to this world? For the physical world, for the downstairs, for the bottom layer of the cave. It's about a 2-story cave, because from Avram's perspective, the ultimate is in the struggle. And that's really the message I want to take away from for me, for finding myself in the city of our fathers. Finding myself in the city of our fathers is not an easy thing. People think that a spiritual journey should be very romantic, very mystical, very, there should be like soft music playing in the background and like dim light so you can properly close your eyes and meditate and get into the groove of the spiritual scene. And that's what many people would visualize as a spiritual experience. Correct? That's what they want. You come to Hebron and you don't see any low music and soft lighting. You see a hard place to live. You see people living in tiny homes, surrounded by enemies that want to kill them. There's no groceries. There's nothing. It's a difficult life. They're constantly under threat 24/7. They're living in a place that has a history of bloodshed and of Jews dying for many years. And yet it's specifically in the struggle that they find connection to our forefathers. It's specifically in the challenge, in the difficulty, in the swamp, in the bottom story, in the downstairs, that they're able to find the real chibur, the real chevron, the real connection, the real bond. That's how we find ourselves in the city of our fathers. Not by looking for a bargain. Not by looking for an easy way out. Not by looking for the fix. But by seeing the challenge, seeing the moment of test, and instead of being discouraged and disillusioned by the test, saying, oh, I found my challenge. I found my moment. I found the time that I can connect and find real holiness. So now I'll tell you, if you don't have to run away, I'll tell you the modern day story of a lady, Sarah Nachshon, that is exactly this story. We didn't meet her or her husband on this trip, but this is a story that happened and showed you it's exactly this. It's exactly this idea of being able to find real connection, real holiness from the challenge. Instead of running from the challenge, but embracing it, realizing it, that from the spiritual perspective on the high, it's the bottom floor of the double floor building where the real value is. Not in the spiritual serenity of soft music on the upstairs. So if you remember, I told you that after 1929, 67 Jews were buried in the cave, in the cemetery of Hebron. And then the Jews were expelled from the city. The British kicked them out. They would not let them come back in. Until 1967. 1967, the Jews conquer all of it's called the West Bank, because on the west side of the Jordan River, it's really Yehuda and Shomron, including Hebron. But even though they conquer, no Jews are living there. No Jews are living there. No Jews are allowed to go there. It's a dangerous place. It's not safe for Jews to go there. No Jews go there. In 1968, there's a group of Jews that felt it's not right. We own Hebron. Jews should live there. Now, the army wasn't giving any permission for any Jews to get anywhere in the West Bank. So there was a group of Jews, including the Nachshons. Baruch Nachshon is a famous artist. His wife is Sarah Nachshon. They have 4 kids. At that time, they had 4 young children. It was led by a rabbi called Rabbi Levinger. And the group of Jews decided to rent what's called the Plaza Hotel in Hebron for Pesach. So they went to this hotel that had been a very beautiful hotel for a lot of Jordanian nobles and aristocrats that would come to Hebron, has clean air, and they would come on vacation. After 67, the Jews took over. No Jordanian tourists were coming to Hebron, and the hotel was basically dead. There was no business there, and the owners of the hotel were struggling. Somehow, Rabbi Levinger gets into Hebron. He puts down a wad of cash, an envelope full of cash on the desk of the manager to rent the hotel for an undisclosed number of people for an undisclosed period of time for the holiday of Passover. This Arab was very, very happy to get the cash. There was nobody in the hotel. Anyway, deal. I don't know if he made his own for Passover. I don't know. Maybe just said for whenever we want. But the hotel was empty. There was no tourists. There was enough cash in the envelope. He got it. They probably didn't tell him the day, probably, because it was undisclosed. He didn't tell him a number of people either. Getting the hotel. The morning before Pesach, 68, a whole convoy of Jews arrived in Hebron to go into the hotel. They didn't have homes or permits. They were going to stay in the hotel. And they parked for Pesach. They came that morning. They got to work. They kashered the kitchen. They took over. There was not enough rooms. It wasn't that big of a hotel. The men were sleeping in the lobby downstairs. The women were in the different rooms with the kids. They took over the hotel and they parked in the hotel. And once they were there, they weren't leaving. And the army couldn't get rid of them. Now, the army had to protect. They said about the Jewish kids that are living in Silwan. The army has to take those kids to school every day. It's their legal obligation to protect the kids and give them schooling. So the army now has to protect a group of Jews that are camped in the heart of Hebron in this big fancy hotel. Not as big, but I'm saying this hotel. They're there. And all the Arabs know about it. So now you have soldiers protecting the hotel with the Jews inside, the Arabs outside, and they're not going anywhere. So eventually, after much negotiation, the officers in charge, they were not so happy with these Jews at all. They didn't care. They came to a compromise that they would leave the hotel and they would go to the army compound in what is today Kiryat Arba. So the army put up a compound. It wasn't in the actual city of Hebron. It was outside, it was right outside the city. And they would let them live there. They would give them housing in the army compound, which would be safe because it's a protected area. And they would let them, stay there. They can live there. Now, they assumed they're going to put the wives and kids into army conditions. We were in the army base. It's a temporary base. They're living with no showers, no running water. They have like border parties. They're in tents. Literally, they're living in tents. Not like for a camping trip for 2 days. Months at a time, they're living in tents. And so they figured out in such terrible conditions, in one room with all the kids and one kitchen for everyone to share and no bathrooms and all that, give it to 2 days. It's gonna fall apart. But guess what? The army totally underestimated the determination of this small group. They didn't understand what it means to be willing to fight for my land, because when I have to fight for it, I know that it's special. And not only did the families not move out, 30 more families eventually ended up moving in. People heard that there's Jews living by Hebron, and the word got out. Now they knew there was an army base where they could go. People were arriving, so we want to live here. Until the entire army base was overflowing with families, the conditions were terrible. It was an army base with families, with kids. They opened a school, everything. 68. Sarah Nachshon gave birth to 3 children in this place. Sarah Nachshon, the woman I'm talking about, gave birth to 3 more children. But they took over. That's what Kiryat Arba is. Kiryat Arba began as this army base, and more families kept coming in. They kept expanding and making more space. They used to go to Ma'aras Machpelah, to the cave of Machpelah, which was, Arab. There was no separation. They would pray next to the Arabs, surrounded by Arabs. You understand what it means to walk? If you think it was dangerous walking now, it was empty. They would walk and they go pray there. She risked her life against the law. She circumcised her son. Sarah Nachshon circumcised her son. Avram Yedidya in Ma'aras Machpelah. And when we make the blessing, when we by a bris make the blessing, he remembers the covenant of Abraham. To say that blessing, that we fulfill the covenant of Abraham in the cave of Abraham in 69 and 70, I don't know exactly what year it was. They did that for the first circumcision in over 700 years in the cave of Machpelah. It was a tremendous, tremendous moment. Tough time. So sorry, a visitor from Canada. They lived there. This was their home in this army base in Kiryat Arba. And their sister came to visit her, living in this cramped, in the one room for the entire family, the parents, the kids, everyone, no bathroom, no nothing. And she was pregnant at the time. So how could you live like this? And she told her sister that I'm happier in my one bedroom here in the land of Israel than in a palace in Canada. Okay? Now, here's a sad story. It was 19, as I said, they kept on growing the army base. 1970, when they officially opened Kiryat Arba out of the army base, and more families kept moving in. But they weren't allowed into Hebron. Kiryat Arba was kind of outside of Hebron, so it was a 15-minute walk to Maras Machpelah. The old cemetery was off limits. In 1975, she's still living in Kiryat Arba. One day, she wakes up and she looks into the crib, and she sees that her 6-month-old son, Avram Yedidya, had passed away in his sleep. It's called SIDS. Sudden infant death. He died in his sleep. He was dead. He was dead. 1975. To make matters worse, her husband, Baruch Nachshon, was an artist, was traveling. He wasn't in the country. He wasn't there. Her husband had traveled. There was no cell phones. There was no way of getting hold of him. And she was going to have to do the funeral of her son without her husband there. Because in Judaism, we don't wait to do a funeral right away. He wasn't nearby. He was traveling. And, until he gets back, it takes a few days. So she starts making the preparations for the burial of her son. There was no cemetery in Kiryat Arba where they were. No one had died. She was the first person in their community to die. And she decided that her son was going to be buried in the Jewish cemetery of Hebron, not in the cave, but in the Jewish cemetery of Hebron, which is around since the year 1290. It's a Jewish cemetery since the year 1290. The last time Jews were buried there was in 1929, when the 67 Jews were killed and they were buried in that cemetery. And from then on, it's off limits. Jews don't want to go there. It's in the heart of the Arabs. It's 100% surrounded by Arabs. And obviously, it would be very inflammatory to have a Jewish cemetery in Hebron. It would be dangerous to protect them and the soldiers. And so the army was not giving any permission to do a burial in the Jewish cemetery because it would inflame tensions. They want to keep things calm and quiet. They don't want to offend anybody. Jews were not allowed in Hebron. They were only in Kiryat Arba. They were not allowed to go to do the funeral in Hebron. She decided she doesn't care what they say. She's doing it. The army set up roadblocks. You understand? Her son passed away that morning. Her husband's out of the country. She's going to the funeral of her son. They're driving to the funeral, and the army put up roadblocks to stop the funeral. They don't have permission. They don't have permits to go further. She gets out of the car. It's already dark. The whole day they're fighting. It's already night has already fallen, and they're still blocked and not able to go. She gets out of the car. She's holding her dead son in her arms. She walks to the soldiers, and she says to the soldiers, "Are you looking for me? Here I am. I'm looking for my baby. My baby's right here. If you don't let us drive to the cemetery, that's fine. We'll walk there in the dark instead, but I'm burying my baby there." The soldiers are radioing what should we do. She's walking, and all the people get out of the cars to follow this grieving mother with her son, and the entire community of Kiryat Arba, not only hundreds of people were coming, the whole community, they were walking behind, and she's walking in the dark, holding her dead baby, walking to the funeral. And the soldiers are radioing, what should we do? And the officer is saying, stop them. And the soldiers said, we're not you come stop them. We're not fighting with a grieving mother at her son's funeral. We refuse, we disobey orders, we're not stopping them. In fact, one of the soldiers came to Mr. Nachshon, was crying. He said, Mr. Nachshon, it's too far for you to walk, and there's danger in the dark. Let me have the honor, I'll drive you. One of the soldiers drove her, and they walked through the army barricades, the blockade, and they came to the cemetery. And Sarah Nachshon said this story. There were hundreds of people there. It was a dark, sweaty summer night. It was late at night in the summer, August. And she says, I have to tell you something. I, Sarah, am holding my dead baby Avram in my arms. And just as Avram, our father, came to Hebron to bury his wife Sarah, so too I, Sarah, have come to Hebron to bury my son Avram Yedidya in the city of our fathers.
Wow.
And that's how she buried her son. And from then on, that was it. They opened it up again. That was the first burial from 1929 till 1975, where Sarah came to bury her Avram in the same city where thousands of years earlier Avram had come to bury his wife Sarah. And the next story about it, one more story I'll tell you about her, is in the 80s. they still weren't letting the Jews into Hebron. Now the Jews in Hebron. But then they were still living outside the city in Kiryat Arba. And there was an empty building in Hebron called Beit Hadassah. It used to be owned by Hadassah. It was a hospital that had been empty since 1929. It was an empty, ruined building. And it was off limits. It was a Jewish building owned by Jewish people. But it was closed. The Jews weren't allowed to go there because they didn't want to, offend anyone. So in 1980, a bunch of women, I think it was 15 women, 15 women and 30 children broke through the barbed wire. There was a barbed wire around it, and they went into the building. And they knew that if the men would go in, the army would then go in and forcibly remove them. But if it would only be women and children in the building, the army wouldn't have the guts to go in and take out women and children. So the men didn't go because they knew the army was very clear, we're going to come take you out. They went in, only women and children. 15 mothers with 30 children entered into Beit Hadassah, the first Jews to live in Hebron, besides for when they were in the Palace Hotel, since 1929. They moved in. And the army was stuck. So again, they're outside, they're protecting the building. The women and the children are inside, and they would not let the men see their husbands. The men see their wives and their kids. They wouldn't let them in. And they were hoping, with nothing there, they're going to give up. There was no running water. There was no electricity in the building. There was no water in the building. And these 15 mothers, they were there 30 kids. And they opened up their own little preschool, and they have classes and programs and games, and the kids are happy, the kids are listening. And they established a school in the building without electricity. And every Friday night, the men would come. The men were living in Kiryat Arba. The men will walk from Kiryat Arba to Hebron. They'll go pray at the cave of Machpelah. On the way home Friday night is very, very special. To pray in Marat Machpelah is very, very special. As there, it's very special. After they would pray, they would walk back to the Beit Hadassah. They would stand outside the building. On top of the lungs, they would sing Shalom Aleichem, and they would sing Eishes Chayil to their wives that were inside. They would stand outside, so they wouldn't let them in. And from outside the building, on the top of the lungs, they would scream the Eishes Chayil to their wives. They would make Kiddush for their wives and for their kids, and then they would go home. And this went on for months. And eventually, after that, when the government agreed to allow these 80 families to start moving into Hebron as a result of these women, that was only they moved out. When the government agreed to start allowing Jews to move into Hebron. So this is what it means to live in the city of our fathers. It wasn't easy for Jews to live in Hebron. If you think it was tough now, it was even tougher then. It was very tough. The sacrifice of these people, of Sarah Nachshon, is tremendous. And if she's still alive, and if you ask her, she'll tell you that's what I had to do to live where I belong. No one, as I quoted before, Dr. Seuss, no one said it'd be easy, just said it'd be worth it. The lesson for us from Avram paying full value for the cave, not just that he paid for every one of us, which he did, but by him paying, he taught us a very important lesson. That when something is important, you have to be willing to pay for it. You have to be willing to fight for it. You have to be willing to go out of your comfort zone and to go out of what's easy, to fight, to be able to declare that which is ours forever. And that's the story of Hebron, my friends. Okay?
What protects the people in Hebron today?
Oh, there's an army there.
There are soldiers there.
What? There's still some soldiers, much, much less. All the times I was in Hebron, there was a very, very strong, visible army presence. This time we saw a few soldiers, and that was it. But the soldiers that are living there, that are on duty, on shift, so you don't see them. They live in homes. Chabad has a very, very big history of Hebron, with Rabbi Menucha Rachel. Alice here, 100% correct. Menucha Rachel Shul, that's what I mentioned before. We were there. That was bought by the previous Rebbe. The middle of his daughter made Aliyah to Israel and lived in Hebron. By the way, the Schneerson family owns property in Hebron till today. Beit Ramana, which is another part of Hebron that Jews are not allowed to live in, although now they're giving permission, and it's another whole story called Beit Ramana. Half of it was owned by, it was a big complex, the army is there. Half of it was owned by a Jew called Yosef Romano. Half of the building was owned by the previous Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. He was willing to sell it to the yeshiva, but he would not sell it to non-Jews or the whole thing, and it stayed in his name. And there's actually letters from the Rebbe, our Rebbe, where the previous Rebbe wanted it to stay in the name of Schneerson, and he went to the embassy and fought. The Rebbe was involved in fighting when the previous Rebbe was still alive, that it shouldn't be changed. When the British took over and all that in 1948, because the Arabs wouldn't recognize it. So in 1948, to get it recognized as a Schneerson property and all that, whatever. Maybe before 1940, with the British. Anyway, now we're going to be building homes there. That's the story, my friends. Gail, I'm glad that you enjoyed. I don't see any comments on Chabad.org. I'm not sure why. But anyway, God willing, next week, same time, same place.
Same place, the same channel,
What?
same place, the same channel.
Same channel. God willing. Glad that you enjoyed, Alice. Definitely a story to remember and definitely a story to share. That's why I shared it. Yes. Thank you, Karine. I'm glad that you're well. Okay, Lila.